When people ask when I decided to leave, I tell them it was at 3:14 p.m. on my 26th birthday. That was the timestamp on my father's second message. The first one had already done its damage. We sold the bike, put the money into the family fund. Be grateful we let you live here. There are messages you reread because you don't understand them. And there are messages you reread because you understand them perfectly, but you're hoping you're wrong. I was at work when it came through. I remember staring at the gray bubble and thinking about the garage. The way I'd wiped the bike down the night before, the way the tank caught the light. It wasn't an expensive motorcycle, it wasn't rare, it wasn't even fully paid off yet. But every overtime shift I'd worked, every skip trip, every repair I'd done myself, it was the only thing in that house that had my fingerprints all over it. I called him once, he didn't answer. The second message came 10 minutes later. Your brother starts college this fall. You'll cover his tuition deposit. $6 due Friday. I typed back before I could overthink it. Numb. 3 letters. My first complete sentence in that family. He replied in under a minute. But then, get out. It wasn't dramatic, no caps, no threats, just a condition. You'll notice there was no discussion about the bike, no apology, no acknowledgement that it was mine, just the assumption that my resources, time, money, labor, were communal property, that my independence was optional, that I was still a dependent, just old enough to fund the younger one. I drove home slowly. The garage was empty when I arrived. The oil stain where the bike used to sit looked darker than usual. I crouched down and touched it, like it might tell me something. Dad was inside watching television. "We got a good price," he said without looking at me. "You'll thank us one day." "For what?" I asked. "For teaching you how families work." That was the moment I understood something uncomfortable. This wasn't about the motorcycle. It wasn't about tuition. It was about leverage. The house had always been the leverage, the unspoken trade. You can stay, but you comply, you contribute. You don't question decisions made, Dave, for the family. I went to my room and closed the door. Then I opened my laptop. 2 months earlier, my supervisor had mentioned a studio opening up near the warehouse. Cheap, nothing special. I'd hesitated at the time. Staying home was practical. I found the email thread and typed 3 words. Is it still available? Then I opened a different tab. Earlier that afternoon, before I drove home, I'd stopped at the DMV during my lunch break. The motorcycle title had always been in my name. I'd insisted on that when I bought it. My father had laughed at the time. Paranoid, he'd said. Maybe. The clerk that day didn't laugh. When I explained that the vehicle had been sold without my authorization, she gave me a form. No judgment, just procedure. By the time I was sitting in my room that evening, the report was already filed. Not dramatic, not emotional, just documented. Around 9, my mother knocked. "You're not really leaving," she said. "Yes," I said. "You can't overreact like this, it's just money." "It was my property." She hesitated. "Your father's trying to secure the future." "Whose?" She didn't answer. My brother texted me later. "Is this about the bike?" I didn't respond. Packing didn't take long. I'd never accumulated much. Clothes, laptop, a small toolbox, the envelope of savings I'd kept hidden behind the false bottom of my desk drawer. I left my bedroom key on the kitchen counter. I did not wake anyone. I did not slam doors. The landlord responded at 4:22 p.m. "Yes, you can move in tomorrow. First month and deposit." I had enough. Before I drove away, I walked into the garage one last time. The shelves were still lined with Dad's tools. His old lawnmower sat in the corner, engine half disassembled. The empty space where my bike used to sit felt less like absence and more like clarity. On the workbench, I left a manila folder. Inside it were copies of the title, the sale listing I'd found online that afternoon, screenshots of Dad's messages, and the police report number written neatly across the top. No note, just information. I drove to my friend's couch for the night. The officer arrived at 8:17 the next morning. I know because my mother called me at 8:23. She was crying. "What did you do?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "I filled out paperwork." Dad had planned to part out the motorcycle. He'd already accepted a deposit from the buyer who picked it up. The buyer apparently did not appreciate learning he'd purchased stolen property. The police weren't aggressive, they weren't dramatic. They asked questions, they requested documentation. They explained that transferring a vehicle without the titled owner's consent constituted fraud. Dad, I imagine, stood very still. He liked to believe rules were flexible inside family walls. They're not. My brother called next. He sounded angry at first. "You got the cops involved?" He sold something that wasn't his. It was for my tuition. I wasn't paying it. Silence. "I didn't know he was making you," he said finally. That was new. I sat on the edge of my friend's couch and let that settle. At 9:02, Dad texted me, "You're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't respond. At 9:47, another message, "Call off the report." I typed carefully, "Return the money, reverse the sale. I'll update the officer when it's resolved." No insults, no threats, just terms. By noon, the buyer had been contacted, the deposit refunded, the motorcycle returned, damaged from hurried transport. Dad stood in the driveway staring at it, I'm told, not because of sentiment, because he'd already factored the profit into what he called his retirement plan. He had counted my compliance as guaranteed income. That calculation no longer worked. I moved into the studio apartment that afternoon. The walls were thin, the kitchen light flickered, the shower pressure was inconsistent. It was mine. That evening, the officer called to confirm the vehicle had been returned and the matter was being settled privately. He reminded me that if anything similar happened again, documentation mattered. "I understand," I said. After we hung up, I sat on the mattress on the floor and stared at the helmet resting beside me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. There's a difference. My mother hasn't called again. My brother texted once more. I'll figure out my own tuition. Dad hasn't apologized. He did send one last message. "You'll regret this when you need us." I looked around at the empty room. I didn't feel regret. I felt space. Some victories don't look like cheering. They look like paperwork, like silence, like standing in a place no one can evict you from and realizing that control only works when you agree to it. At 26, I learned that saying no cost something, but staying would have cost.